I don't know what's wrong with the people there, you know. If Novak is not welcoming, they're supposed to say that. Please don't come. And if they issue the visa for him, and after that they arrest him, this is like, for me, it looks like trap for the animals, you know, like a wolf, animals in the mountain, you know. And they invite him to come and they trap him and put him in the jail, trying to put him on his knees.
Number 10 say Boris Johnson will not face an investigation into the refurbishment of his Downing Street flat. Labour called for an inquiry after it emerged the Prime Minister had discussed the project with Lord Brownlow through WhatsApp messages. But the PM's official spokesman says it's been confirmed that the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards wouldn't be looking any further into the matter. The government is considering cutting the COVID isolation period for the fully vaccinated in England from 7 days to 5. Speaking during a visit to the vaccination centre in his West London constituency, Boris Johnson says they're following the science and that lateral flow tests will continue to be freely available.
I think that we'll use them as long as they're very important, and there's a similar argument to be had about the quarantine period, whether to come down from 7 days to 5 days. We're looking at that, and we'll act according to the science.
Pregnant women are being urged to get vaccinated against COVID-19 to protect their babies. The Department for Health and Social Care say nearly all of pregnant women, 96% of them, who were hospitalised with COVID symptoms between May and October last year, hadn't taken the vaccine. The government say the jabs are safe during pregnancy and have no impact on fertility. Developers and companies that sought to profit from the cladding crisis are being put on notice, the Housing Secretary says. In the last hour, Michael Gove told MPs that leaseholders were shouldering an unfair burden and those who have profited should be paying for the mistakes. Labour say the measures are a move in the right direction, but plans are still too vague. Mr Gove also says legal measures could be used to push developers into paying for repair work.
Leaseholders are shouldering a desperately unfair burden. They're blameless, and it is morally wrong that they should be the ones asked to pay the price. I'm clear about who should pay the price for remedying failures. It should be the industries who profited as they caused the problem and those who continue to profit as they make it worse. We will also ensure that those who profited and continue to profit from the sale of unsafe buildings and construction products must take full responsibility for their actions and pay to put things right.
8 men who lost a high court case against Manchester City Football Club in a battle against a former youth coach have said they will appeal. The former players claim the convicted paedophile, Barry Bennell, abused them when they were playing for teams that he coached between 1979 and 85. They say Manchester City were vicariously liable for the harm they suffered, but a judge ruled against them, saying the connection was insufficient and that legal action was brought too late. A lawyer representing the men says they will appeal. The last 7 years were the hottest on record by a clear margin, according to EU scientists. The Copernicus Climate Change Service say Europe experienced its hottest summer ever last year. The soaring temperatures caused intense wildfires in Turkey and Greece, with the highest temperature recorded in Sicily at 48.8 degrees. Buckingham Palace has unveiled the lineup of celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. It'll mark her 70 years on the throne with a 4-day UK bank holiday weekend from the 2nd to the 5th of June. A platinum pudding competition that'll be judged by a panel including Dame Mary Berry is among some of the events being planned, which also includes street parties and a concert. Well, that's it for now. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Now it's 4:05 and back to Colin.
Hi there, giving the news a twist on this episode of Brazier. Is it time to ape the American model and slash the self-isolation period for COVID contacts to 5 days, a senior doctor offers us a view. Also from Serbia with love, Novak Djokovic gets the all clear to stay in Australia, but given his treatment, why on earth would he? And the trouble with the Hubble, why the old space telescope has been upstaged by something far more focused. Hi there and welcome. Is it time then for the UK to adopt a 5-day-long isolation period and start getting back to normal? All of the newspaper front pages that touched on COVID this morning, it's worth saying, rang a very positive note. We're going to share some of them with you in just a second. Ministers were quoted calling for more relaxed measures in some, and others focused on the NHS not coming under the levels of strain many of the more, well, I think it's probably fair to say, alarmist at time modellers claimed it would ahead of Christmas. Overall, the mood seems to have shifted, a change in the epidemiological wind, perhaps. Going, gone. At last, some good news as COVID cases start to fall, headlined the often cautious Metro. The iPaper's front page went like this: PM expected to announce living with COVID plan, with the article claiming the new, more optimistic strategy was expected to be revealed in weeks. The Times, self-styled paper of record, meanwhile said, we'll avoid COVID crisis, says upbeat NHS chiefs. Well, some of you believe the media focuses excessively on downbeat media medical chiefs. So this one stood out for you. There it is, Daily Telegraph leading with Sunak backs call for 5-day isolation period. Even The Guardian actually ran a headline quoting the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, saying, quote, the UK should be a pioneer for living with COVID. So is there now a gathering consensus that we are moving from a pandemic to an endemic of a milder form of the virus, a milder variant of the virus? And if this is a new living with COVID creed, will that translate into a cut in those self-isolation periods that are started this afternoon with? Joining me now, Dr. Lawrence Buckman, a former chairman of the British Medical Association's GPs Committee. Doctor, thanks so much for your time today. Very much appreciate it. Almost as we've been speaking, actually, just a shade under, a few minutes ago, I read in Scotland, and this I quote this to underline my point, rather. In Scotland, latest data out for COVID, 24 hours, 11,827 new cases, but no deaths. I wonder how much of a story that tells.
I think it's the promising beginning of what is likely to be the evidence that coronavirus is now moving from pandemic to endemic phase. We haven't got the evidence yet. As for a 5-day shortening from 7 days for a quarantine period, we haven't got any evidence to back that up yet. But I suspect that over the next few weeks we will. So the apparent report of Boris Johnson saying there'll be a plan for living with COVID from March sounds to me to be realistic.
As part of that plan to live with COVID, where do you stand on the, I was going to say vexed question, I mean, it is a question of whether there ought to be fourth and subsequent booster jabs?
There is no evidence presently to support a fourth jab. There are countries around the world that are giving a fourth jab, and I'm not quite sure what evidence they're basing that on. But all the reports I've seen suggest that 3, for the moment, is enough. Now, if we found that antibody levels and T-cell protection diminished over the next 6 months, say, then we might have to reconsider a booster. And we might well end up with flu jabs and COVID jabs annually. That I can see that could well be a forward move. But we can't say that yet. We've got no evidence to back that up.
Israel, wasn't it? Israel who've pioneered the fourth booster jab. I mean, one of the good things, I suppose, if we can talk about the fight against COVID, is that when you've got so many different approaches, I mentioned that apropos Israel, you've got so many different nations, so many different sets of medical procedures and attitudes, all coming to bear on different variants. I mean, that is kind of a silver lining, isn't it?
Yeah, so it certainly gives you a plethora of evidence. There's lots to go on. And for the moment, the question for Israel, for example, is whether antibody immunity, which is what they're trying to boost with a fourth jab, or T-cell immunity, which is your body's own inbuilt protection, which goes sniffing out coronavirus, whether you need antibodies and T-cells or you can manage with one or the other. At the moment, the Israeli plan is you have to have antibodies, and that is a completely reasonable approach. But we don't have the evidence to show that the alternative, which is to wait and see what happens next, whether that would be better, and certainly would be cheaper and would be easier And we will all have a fourth dose, say, in a year's time. I mean, we just don't know. I don't think we're many weeks away from having a pretty clear idea of where COVID is going. It certainly looks like, with evidence you just reported from Scotland, that as the death rate falls, the endemic nature of what will become a relatively less serious illness is rising. And I think we may reach the point where we can say, OK, let's move to 5 days. I don't think we're there yet, but we're not far off.
Part of the problem here is that, yes, this is a kind of global laboratory in real time. But if this were a laboratory experiment, people wouldn't be dying in the numbers they have died. I just come back to, you mentioned the 5-day period. I mean, that is another illustration, isn't it, of the diversity of approach that's taken. I mean, the Americans at times have been pretty draconian in some of their attitudes. On the 5-day self-isolation period, rather less so. But it's not as if lots of countries are stampeding behind them to follow their lead. People, by this stage, it feels internationally, have decided they know what their national approach is to COVID and managing their particular problems.
Yes, it depends how you view the fact that 10 to 30% of people on the 6th day are still infectious. If you say, well, it's a minor illness, we've got to live with it, then OK, and I can see pressing economic arguments for making it 5 days. However, if you say that 30% still infectious at 6 days is too much and risks too much ill health in the community, whether that ill health is very serious or quite serious, I don't think you're yet in a position to make a judgment on 5 days. As I say, I don't think that's a long way away. It's just not quite yet. Maybe 2-3 weeks, something like that, we'll have a pretty clear idea. Certainly if death rates fall to next to nothing, that's going to be a very clear indication that having infection on day 6 probably is not quite so crucial in the Omicron world, unless, of course, we'd find another variant to get worried about.
Dr. Lawrence Buckman, as ever, thanks very much indeed for your time. As Dr. Buckman was saying there, worth just repeating those figures from Scotland. In the last hour, they've reported north of the border 11,827 new cases. As Dr. Buckman was making clear there, the striking feature of that daily batch of statistics is that there were no deaths reported, even though they were getting on for 12,000 new cases in a 24-hour period in Scotland. Some of our viewers feel that the hue and cry over Novak Djokovic is overblown, and they probably have a point. In a world where COVID has ended lives and businesses, who cares whether a multi-millionaire sportsman has to spend a few days cooped up in a 5-star hotel? But there are plenty of others who think that this case is about much more than an elite athlete wasting 25 hours travelling to Australia. They argue that the case speaks to wider truths about freedom, dissent, and the rule of law over political opportunism. Well, we're not going to rehearse how we got here, other than to remind you of some of the essential facts. The world's #1 tennis player came to Melbourne to play in the Australian Open, only to find himself forced into quarantine in a hotel after border officials cancelled his visa, a decision that seems to have more to do with politicians wanting to appear tough on COVID before elections later this year than it has to do with virology. Cue an almighty row, which culminated in a legal hearing which saw a judge overturn that decision. Well, there he is playing. Here he is shortly. We'll show you the pictures in a car. These are the scenes as Djokovic left his lawyer's office earlier. You can imagine them. At least one man was arrested. There you go. It's not clear whether this is where the matter now rests and whether the Australian Open will yet see the world #1 on court. Well, before we speak to a tennis expert, our reporter Balvinder Sidhu has been out speaking to people on one high street in the West Midlands, getting their views.
Djokovic, he's a bit of a different case because he's an athlete on a certain level. He can kind of get away with things that other people might not, so they've shown a light on him, but he's been able to do whatever now, but other people that might not be the case, so it's a bit tricky with him, but it is spurring the conversation of people taking or not taking the thing, which, as I said, it's something that to be had, so yeah.
Well, I don't think he should have gone into the country knowing their policies. He's got money, hasn't he? So, to me, that's what spoke for him. If it was me going over there, they would have sent me straight home. So that's my opinion.
No, he should have been sent home. He should have been sent home. He hadn't got his right papers. He's educated enough to know that he should be getting in there with his right credentials with him. And he hadn't got them with him, so that's it. That's the law of their land, isn't it?
At the moment, what it feels like more so is it's more you have to have it to do certain things. At first, it was like we're advising it because we're trying to help you. Now it's like, actually, if you want to go and do holidays or travel somewhere or do something, you need to have this. Or if you want to go out and do this, it's now more of like a mandatory to get on with life. Otherwise, you live with restriction.
You know, he's a professional player, so he should know what he's doing when he's going abroad and this, that and the other. But obviously, it's your choice if you want to be vaccinated or not. But then again, some countries let you in, some countries won't let you fly or whatever else. So it's just one of them things, isn't it? So
A view there on the Novak Djokovic case from the West Midlands. Well, let's turn to the tennis correspondent at the Sunday Times, Barry Flatman. Barry, thanks very much indeed for your time this afternoon. Very much appreciated. There is a particular feature of this story, and that's, I suppose, that Serbia, not a huge country, but there's a sense in which Novak Djokovic has come, in a sense, to represent a lot of its values. He's got an importance to that country out of all proportion with the way the rest of the world sees him. He's a national hero in the truest sense of the word. So when they feel he's affronted, misused, maltreated almost, they take it personally.
Very vehemently, they take it personally, yes. Novak is their pride and joy. And to stop him from playing in what would be a historic, history-making Australian Open, he would become the first, if he wins, if he plays, he would become the first man to win 10 times. And to endanger that would be something of a national blow.
Barry, I'm just reading that he's been training midnight local time. How damaging to his training schedule has been cooped up in a hotel ordering room service?
Well, not good. Not good at all. He literally got off an aeroplane and walked into this mess. But that said, he should have been expecting it because he knows Australia is a very litigious place. They make rules and they stick to them, the Australians. And in this case, it's a very strong rule and a rule that all the Australian population have lived and abided with. And if they saw Novak Djokovic just skipping through, smiling and saying, I'm a superstar, I don't have to abide by that rule, then there will be hell to pay.
Isn't this more a story of how the federal government in Canberra is striking a more assertive tone than the Victoria government, which seems to have smiled on this visa application? I mean, there were a set of medical experts who looked at this application to come to the country, signed it off. I mean, that's what the judge said in this latest ruling in cancelling the visa. He said, you know, why wouldn't he come? I mean, he seemed to have been given the green light. He behaved perfectly reasonably thereafter, Novak Djokovic. Why wouldn't he come?
Well, there's certainly an element of that in federal against state government. And that particular clash has risen many times over the Australian Open, but not with this amount of noise. And I think, you know, COVID has really caught people's worldwide attention, and certainly in Australia, where the measures taken were very, very stringent. And as I said, you know, if the Australian population saw Novak Djokovic walk in as if to say, well, these rules don't apply to me, then it wouldn't have looked very, very good for the Australian government, either federal or state.
It will look to, Barry, it will look to some people like he's become, whether he's sought it or not, a sort of standard bearer for a particular perspective on COVID. Let's just set that aside. Let's just talk about his tennis playing abilities. I think I'm right in saying he's 34. He was keen to ideally notch up another Open victory. That would take him into a sort of lonely place ahead of the pack, but as pretty much the best player we've pretty much seen. How many more years does he have left in the tank?
Well, he does appear to be a very fit individual. Nobody plays on forever. But if Roger Federer played on till, 40, so I think Novak Djokovic, that is a potentiality.
Barry Flatman, appreciate your perspective on this. Thanks ever so much.
If he wins this this title, it will put him above Federer and Nadal with 21 majors. They both have 20.
If, well, it looks like he is going to play, we think. Barry Flatman of the Sunday Times, really appreciate your time this evening. Thanks very much indeed. Barry Flatman joining us there. Just to recap on those figures, we're expecting the rest of the UK's figures to come in on COVID, but potentially significant data from Scotland in the last hour, getting on for 12,000 new cases, but no deaths reported. Bring those latest figures for the rest of the UK through to you very soon. And also, when we can fire up the guest, the latest on the high street at Wilko, the latest to close stores there. But for the meantime, let's bring in the weather.
Hello again. After a fairly dull day for many today, it should be a lot brighter tomorrow, certainly across the northern half of the UK. Another fairly grey and at times damp day to come tomorrow across the south. It's these weather fronts providing the rain, but they are slowly but surely drifting southwards, and as they clear away, we will see breaks in the cloud developing across Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. But certainly pretty damp here through this evening. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle covering most of England and Wales, and at times through the night, some of that rain may just turn a little heavy, especially over the East Midlands up towards Lincolnshire. But as it clears from Scotland and Northern Ireland, we will just see maybe some pockets of frost, certainly in rural areas. But the south, though, we're a long way from a frost, with temperatures holding up with all that cloud and rain and drizzle. A dank and misty, murky start to Tuesday then for most of England and Wales. But quite quickly, Northern England, North Wales turning brighter, a much brighter day for Scotland and Northern Ireland. There will still be showers across the Highlands, the Northern Isles and the Western Isles, and still pretty windy across the far north too. But elsewhere, the winds are light, and across the south, it should turn slowly drier, although the rain and drizzle lingering across East Anglia and the southeast till late on. Mild here, further north, temperatures closer to average. Quite quickly, though, temperatures will drop with the clear skies on Tuesday evening. Southern Scotland, Northern England, and then later further south across England and Wales. And as well as turning frosty, there will be some patches of fog, which could be quite dense and could last for much of Wednesday. Generally, though, Wednesday's a dry and a bright day for the vast majority. Still quite cloudy across the northwest with some patchy rain, still quite breezy here as well. But elsewhere, the winds are light, and for many, it'll be a bright winter's day with blue skies, plenty of sunshine. And temperatures after that frosty start close to average. Highest temperatures actually in the northwest. But if the fog sticks, that could really suppress the temperatures. And we're going to see more of that, I think, as the week goes on. Thicker, denser patches of fog, which will take much of the day to clear.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Now, hundreds of jobs under threat after Wilko announced plans to close 16 stores this year in another blow for the high street. The move comes amid warnings from bosses that customers are changing the way they shop, with Wilko increasing their investments online. The firm says the branches will close at the end of their leases after they fail to agree favourable terms with the individual branches. Well, joining us now, the retail expert, Jeremy Baker. Jeremy, thanks ever so much for your time today. Appreciate it. It's a familiar lament, this, isn't it, that well-known high street brands are failing. And you'd have to say, if you were going to imagine one sector that was going to survive, had a reasonable expectation of survival, hardware, the sort of stuff that Wilko sells, you would expect to be one of them.
Yes, because in the last couple of years, during the lockdown, DIY has really powered ahead. So it's bad luck on this company that they haven't been able to keep up. I think it's part of a kind of long-term trend, and the virus has accelerated the trend, but the trend was there anyway. So Wilko has looked at the 2022, will the consumers have any money to spend on us as a company? Then he decided, no, might as well give up now instead of throwing good money after bad. Mm-hmm. So that's the position. And it fits in with the idea 2022, year of the squeeze. But retail is always looking for opportunities. So there's a lot of good things on the horizon. So year of the squeeze is also year of the adapt. You've got to adapt. And so if you look, who's adapting well, at the cheap end of the market, the pound stores really are pretty amazing. They really are good value. You're too middle class to go in a pound store, but poor
Jeremy,
people
you're making all kinds of sweeping assumptions. And in fact, some of my younger children are actually very attracted to some of those pound stores, so you need to be careful.
Yes.
I just wonder what's
the
sorry, Jeremy, just on before we enter into a protracted bout of class warfare, can we just consider the rationale for these companies when they decide, if it's Wilko, to close 16 stores? Is it entirely on the basis of, they look at the map, they see which particular branches aren't doing sufficiently well, and that's it,
Yes.
or is there more to it?
Yes. No, each store is in a particular neighborhood, and that neighborhood has got a particular demographic. It's kind of for rich people or middle class or poor people. And their store fits in well, perhaps, with some areas and badly with other areas. And so the bad areas is ones we delete from our list. That's the way to do it. Going back to the pound stores doing very well. Also, the high street is kind of a community area. So I think as the stores close, maybe GPs will come in there, or where's to get the jab? I've seen jab places filling this place. And also, going back to the year of the adapt, luxury stores, frankly, are doing pretty well. It's a horrible thing to say, but the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer in 2022. That's the way things are going. Whether that's a good political point to make, I don't know. But from a retail point of view, you see rich people having a lot of money and spending it on, luxury foods, luxury products, luxury biscuits and pens and everything. So the rich are doing well. If you're targeting the rich, you're going to do well. If you're targeting the very poor and you've got a good offer for them, like pound stores, then you're also doing very well. So my theory is year of the squeeze, year of adapt.
It's a good mantra. Jeremy Baker, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Let's bring you the rest of the day's news now, once we've got rid of the music, with Tamsin.
Thank you very much, Colin. Here are the headlines. Michael Gove has said the government will take action to protect leaseholders in the ongoing cladding crisis. The Housing Secretary told MPs leaseholders were shouldering an unfair burden and developers and companies that sought to profit should pay for the mistakes. Sir Keir Starmer has said the action is welcome but very late. Novak Djokovic says he is pleased and grateful the judge overturned his visa cancellation and aims to compete in the Australian Open. Earlier today, a court ruled he did have the required medical exemption to enter the country without a COVID vaccine. But the nation's immigration minister says he reserves the right to exercise personal power to expel the star from the country. The government is considering cutting the COVID isolation period for the fully vaccinated people in England from 7 days to 5. Speaking during a visit to a vaccination centre in his West London constituency, Boris Johnson says ministers will follow the science. The Prime Minister also says lateral flow tests will continue to be freely available. The last 7 years were the hottest on record by a clear margin, according to EU scientists. The Co-Pernicious Climate Change Service say Europe experienced its hottest summer ever last year. The soaring temperatures caused intense wildfires in Turkey and Greece, with the highest temperature recorded in Sicily at 48.8 degrees. Buckingham Palace has unveiled the lineup of celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Her 70 years on the throne will be marked by a 4-day UK bank holiday weekend from the 2nd to the 5th of June. A platinum pudding competition will be judged by a panel including Dame Mary Berry, and there'll be a number of street parties and concerts. Well, you're right up to date. It's 4:32. I'll be back with more on today's main stories at 5 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Well, going to be talking space in just a second, but something a bit more germane to many of your lives. What's happening with COVID, and in particular, where we stand in relation to the number of cases versus the number of hospitalisations. And the key metric, hospitalisations, whether somebody is sufficiently ill with coronavirus to be admitted to hospital. Latest figures in this of the UK as a whole, told you about the Scotland figures. They're quite promising. No deaths reported in the last 24-hour period, though getting on for 12,000 cases. UK-wide, where are we? They've just dropped in the last 10 minutes or thereabouts. 17,120 people in hospital in England with COVID as of 8 a.m. This was this morning. Now, that is the highest number since February of last year. But the key thing is, if you compare that peak of last year, you are then talking about a peak of almost double where we are now, 34,336 on January the 18th of 2021. So the week-on-week hospitalisations figure, it's gone up around about 20%, but we are nowhere near, we are well short of the peaks of last year. And this feeds into what we've been telling you a little earlier on in the show, that actually this is beginning to look, Omicron, like something which can be managed almost as would be managed something like flu, rather than something which leads to everything closing down with mass problems for the rest of the health system and all the rest of it. More on that as and when. We're talking to a doctor on the front line very soon too about what this means for him. Now, we're going to talk about the largest and most powerful space telescope that's yet been launched. It's NASA's. It's called the James Webb Space Telescope, the agency's successor to the famous Hubble telescope. It was launched on Christmas Day. The mission aims to study some of the oldest stars we know of and peer back further into the past of the universe. Webb is currently on a 29-day-long trip to its observing location, some million miles away. The number's mind-boggling, this being space and all. Well, the Deputy Executive Director at the Royal Astronomical Society is Robert Massey, who joins us, I'm very pleased to say. Robert Massey, thank you so much for your time. James Webb really is, I mean, just looking at the unfolding of the mirror, I mean, to talk about precision engineering doesn't even come close.
It's extraordinary. I mean, frankly, I think NASA described 344 points of failure, and they've gone through 3/4 of those now, which is fantastic. I mean, it's an incredibly ambitious thing to do this. You're talking about folding up a telescope with a gold-coated mirror that's already has to be designed to incredibly deployed unfolding a solar shield to basically to keep it cool, a bigger reflecting device there, multiple layers of thin film, tensioning that up, and if you didn't do that right, then the telescope wouldn't keep cool, it wouldn't work. But that was successful, and then finally, to get the mirror unfolded so that instead of being in sort of 3 segments, it's unfolded into a mirror shape so that it will focus the light and the telescope will work. Then, that's just been done in the last couple of days. We're still about 6 months from seeing the first images from it, because even with all that, it's still got to go to the right place in space, enter a stable orbit, commission all the instruments and all of those things. But it is really good news. It's amazing that that they've managed to achieve this much so far, let alone what will follow.
It's a fascinating way of charting the progress of the mission as it goes through those points of failure. It's an interesting lesson for many other walks of life, I imagine. In terms of what it's going to tell us, that Hubble couldn't, where are we?
Well, this telescope is an infrared telescope. So Hubble was looking in mostly visible light. So the light you and I can see, a little bit of ultraviolet, a little bit of infrared. Infrared is light that's redder than red. Okay, so it's associated with heat and so on. And as you move, heat is basically infrared radiation. As you move further into that, you get towards the sort of temperatures you and I have and then beyond. And the important point is that radiation, infrared, will cut through dust. So an awful lot of the stuff we see in space is shrouded in dust. And what that means is that if you look at it in infrared light, you can see the objects inside. Now, this is particularly important for the earliest galaxies because they are red-shifted. What that means is they are moving away from us at very high speed because of the expansion of the universe. And because they're ancient. There's a lot of concepts to getting here quickly, but if you imagine light traveling a vast distance, we see those objects as they were billions of years ago, and it is therefore possible to see the galaxies that formed, first galaxies and stars that formed after the universe began, but only in infrared light. And that's one of the fantastic things that the James Webb Telescope will aim to do, is to show us the first stars and galaxies that formed in the universe.
Robert, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that James Webb is pure science. It's pure science. There's no other angle to it. And from the Royal Astronomical Society's perspective, I mean, how do you perceive what's happening in terms of the space story right now? Very rich men, billionaires, going into space, sending people into space, very much human exploration of space first, coupled with what feels like a revival almost of those Cold War era struggles between communist regimes and the free world, if we can characterise it thus. But science, naked science and science first, perhaps just slipping down the agenda a bit.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of profile, I think that's a risk. I mean, that it's undoubtedly the case that people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson, and so on, by talking up the space tourism market, although I'm skeptical about how big that market actually is, that's an entirely different discussion. Are undoubtedly capturing the imagination of people, and that whether or not that's ever going to be much more than something that's available to the really very wealthy, if not the super rich, is a very good question. So I do wonder how sustainable that is. Certainly with the current technology we have in rocket systems, which is not fundamentally that different from what we had 50, 60 years ago. I mean, the difference in the case of, say, SpaceX is that they're able to reuse things more, and that's great, but it doesn't make it cheap by the standards of, without making too many assumptions about your salary and wealth and so on. This is not something that most of us could afford, even fairly well-off people. It's way out of their reach. So
yeah.
I think, though, that the imagination of the public, although we see those things, you still have to be blown away by the pure science as well, which of course does, by the way, have applications here on Earth. I mean, for example, radio astronomy led to Wi-Fi. Where would we be without Wi-Fi? It's extraordinarily important in so many aspects of our lives. But the inspiration that comes from it is huge. If we have a right, I think, as a species, to ask those big questions, to say, how did the universe begin? Is there life elsewhere in the universe? How did life on Earth begin, if you want to go to biology as well? All of those things, it's absolutely legitimate to ask them. And I think it's really important that we've got the technology to do it, and we can do it way like this with this apparently, hopefully very successful mission, that we get to do that.
It must be the suit I'm wearing or something. You're the second consecutive guest who's made assumptions about my background. The last one was suggesting I'd never been near a pound stretcher store. What am I giving off? What am I giving off today? Just a final thought before we let you go, Robert. It just feels like Space 2.0, this rebooting of the space story. As you say, it's generating a lot of interest. That next generation of people who, like you, presumably started out plotting the progress of the stars with maybe a pair of binoculars or something, are they coming through because of it, because of this new heat around space?
I think it certainly helps, and I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if anybody's ever had the money or the resources to commission recent opinion polls on this stuff, but it's certainly very much appreciated. I mean, last year we saw that because people were stuck at home during the various lockdowns, so they had to enjoy their surroundings. Part of that was looking up at the night sky. It wasn't like the sky was particularly dark, all the street lights were still on. But maybe it just gave us that time to reflect. And that's got to be a good thing. If we want to make better decisions, ask those big questions, think about our place in the universe and what it means for our life here on Earth, then that doesn't seem like a bad thing to me.
Robert Massey, really appreciate your time. Thanks ever so much. Well, next up, our debate segment. Today we're asking, are you afraid to speak your mind about vaccine passes after the Djokovic row? The world's #1 tennis player has been ridiculed by the international elite and effectively physically detained in Australia for not conforming to the COVID consensus, you could suggest. And in the online world, there's been a new wave of people getting kicked off Twitter for their views about COVID. More than a million people have recently joined the app Getter, and today also marks the anniversary since big tech firms took the other alternative social media platform Parler offline. Well, in a moment, we're going to speak to the head of policy at Parler. But first, we were going to have some of your views on that topic. We're not going to bother doing that now. We're going to go straight to the head of policy at Parler, Amy Pykoff. Amy, thanks so much indeed for your time. Appreciate you joining us today. A year on, where are we now?
So, I mean, a year after this deplatforming, I would say that we've learned quite a bit about what may have been the intention. At the time, it was easy to see that part of the intention was likely to deprive former President Donald Trump of a platform. Many people knew that Trump had been rumored to come over to Parler after having been banned from Twitter, if you recall. But now, a year later, and the fact that we've seen the larger social media platforms clamp down on so-called misinformation or disinformation, particularly around COVID-related policies, we start to wonder whether part of the motivation was that they knew that Parler was a place where people are free to think for themselves, to share freely, to read information freely. And, what we've done is we've seen not only the rebuilding as motivating us, remotivating us towards our original mission of providing a free speech platform, a free thought platform, but we also see the importance of it a lot more clearly.
Amy, what are your numbers? I mean, there's a perception abroad, I'm not sure how accurate or otherwise it is, that Getter's got off to a cracking start, some big names signing, some big numbers, a sense that they are not an echo chamber, they're reaching out to disparate groups. What are your numbers? How are you actually performing?
I'm not exactly sure about the numbers. I know that our steady traffic is up from what it was a year ago for sure, but I haven't looked too recently. I know that recently there's been a surge of people going over to Getter, but we all know that the big test is retention. And, we're in this for the long haul. We think that Parler is a better product. Of course, I'm very biased since I work for them, but, we'll see. Time will tell.
Those people who move across to you, what reasons do they give? What are they citing? I mean, we had a news amalgamating news site taken offline, I think by Twitter, only last week, and they were left nonplussed. They didn't know why. The terms and conditions are pretty vague. You can find yourself in breach of them, and it's not entirely visible as to why. Why are people coming over to you?
Well, I think at Parler, people know that with respect to all speech that is legal, and in the United States, for us, in any event, it's still legal to say things that some people deem to be misinformation, right? So the illegal speech is going to be having to do with threats and violence, et cetera. If it's legal, you can say it on Parler, and people know that. They know that they're not going to be banned, deplatformed. They're not going to have their posts taken down for violating some vague misinformation policy. And you and I know that what is misinformation, according to the authorities, can change from week to week. And that's a very precarious place for people to be in.
Amy, what do you say to those people? And they were out there in the public square in abundance last week, marking the first anniversary of those riots at the Capitol building, around the Capitol building in Washington. What do you say to those who make it abundantly clear that as far as they're concerned, Parler, in common with others, but the likes of Parler, stoked up things to such a degree, peddled misinformation that violence, bloody violence, fatal violence ensued?
I understand that people still believe that, but there were stories that came out in the months after our deplatforming that discussed the fact that in the weeks leading up to January 6, 2021, Parler referred public posts to law enforcement, and it was over 50 public posts to law enforcement. So there was no way that Parler was at all complicit in any sort of coordination. And in fact, the FBI released a report in August of 2021 stating that they did not find any significant coordination of the events of the 6th anywhere, much less on Parler.
Just on that, Amy, what does it? Can you give us some concrete examples to take this away from the abstract? What would I have to say to get kicked off Parler?
So it would be a threat. So an actual threat to a person. I'm going to go and shoot whoever it is. Or it would be incitement. So you'd say, hang this person, where it wasn't in the context of calling for, say, a capital punishment in a convicted criminal's case, right? You would make a distinction between those two things. So anything that's threat or incitement, any calls for vigilante justice, those have never been allowed on Parler.
Are they actually in step with the law as it stands, the law of the land, I mean, rather than just a company's guidelines? Because sometimes people say, these are our guidelines, but actually what they're really stating is just the legal position, the federal position.
Right. And what Parler does is we operate the platform in the spirit of the First Amendment. And, I understand, and one of the things that a producer of yours discussed with me is that you have an anti-disinformation unit there in the in the UK. And in the United States, because we have the First Amendment, there would not be a government body that would be patrolling misinformation or disinformation online. We would challenge it under the First Amendment of the Constitution. So we at Parler, we believe in that. We think it is best for human beings to do their own thinking about things. We don't think that having Big Brother telling you what they say is or is not deemed to be false or partially true this week is something that you should rely upon. You should do your own critical thinking. And, one of the things that we think people are concerned about right now is that they think their ability to give fully free informed consent to certain medical procedures, right, that are being mandated around the world, that is being taken away from them because these big tech platforms are removing critical pieces of information that they can use to decide for themselves, to get that virtual second opinion, which is what many of us are relegated to these days.
And what do you say to those people who will argue, not for Parler, but say with Twitter, less than 1 in 5 of Britons are actually on Twitter, and a far fewer proportion of that number are actually active participants on it every day, tweeting and being part of that public conversation. There are those people, as I say, who say it's not irrelevant, but its relevance is taken out of all proportion with what it actually feeds into that national conversation, which is made up of so many moving parts, whether that's newspapers, TV, parliamentary democracy, periodicals, etc., etc., etc. It's one wee voice.
And so you're saying, what do I make of the coordination among all of these entities?
Well, of the fact that actually, Parler, you want Parler to be part of that conversation. You maybe want Parler to catch up with Twitter, but even Twitter is only there in the hands of 20% of the British population. I don't know what the figure is in the States, but here in the UK, it's 1 in 5 who have a Twitter account, and as I say, even fewer are active on it. So, it's got this. We're left with an impression sometimes that the world moves according to the latest Twitter storm. It does for some people, not for everyone.
No, of course not. Of course not. And I think one of the reasons that people get turned off of Twitter is because some of the engagement enhancing algorithms that they've put out there, besides the fact that they have shadow banning and censorship of certain voices depending on misinformation, right? That turns people off, that they don't feel like they're just getting what they're asking for, which is they would like to go and they would like to follow the voices that they would like to hear. And when they log on, they would like to actually see those in their feed. And more, they're not getting that. There are some platforms that are, in the spirit of competing and trying to do better, are maybe offering a so-called chronological feed as an alternative for people, but we've always done that on Parler. That's what we do. We give you what you asked for. And so if you can come and you can get news, uncensored news in one place, we think that that's going to win out in the end.
Amy Pykoff, we'll see you, won't we? Thanks very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to a working NHS doctor about how the service is coping, and we'll reflect those latest COVID numbers. Some promise within them tonight.
Hello again. After a fairly dull day for many today, it should be a lot brighter tomorrow, certainly across the northern half of the UK. Another fairly grey and at times damp day to come tomorrow across the south. It's these weather fronts providing the rain, but they are slowly but surely drifting southwards, and as they clear away, we will see breaks in the cloud developing across Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. But certainly pretty damp here through this evening. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle covering most of England and Wales, and at times through the night, some of that rain may just turn a little heavy, especially over the East Midlands up towards Lincolnshire. But as it clears from Scotland and Northern Ireland, we will just see maybe some pockets of frost, certainly in rural areas. But the south, though, we're a long way from a frost, with temperatures holding up with all that cloud and rain and drizzle. A dank and misty, murky start to Tuesday then for most of England and Wales. But quite quickly, Northern England, North Wales turning brighter, a much brighter day for Scotland and Northern Ireland. There will still be showers across the Highlands, the Northern Isles and the Western Isles, and still pretty windy across the far north too. But elsewhere, the winds are light, and across the south, it should turn slowly drier, although the rain and drizzle lingering across East Anglia and the southeast till late on. Mild here, further north, temperatures closer to average. Quite quickly, though, temperatures will drop with the clear skies on Tuesday evening. Southern Scotland, northern England, and then later further south across England and Wales. And as well as turning frosty, there will be some patches of fog, which could be quite dense and could last for much of Wednesday. Generally, though, Wednesday's a dry and a bright day for the vast majority. Still quite cloudy across the northwest with some patchy rain. Still quite breezy here as well. But elsewhere, the winds are light. And for many, it'll be a bright winter's day with blue skies, plenty of sunshine. And temperatures after that frosty start close to average. Highest temperatures actually in the northwest. But if the fog sticks, that could really suppress the temperatures. And we're going to see more of that, I think, as the week goes on. Thicker, denser patches of fog, which will take much of the day to clear.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone I have. We learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Those latest COVID figures released in the last 30 minutes, they show that 17,000 people are in hospital with COVID in England. Numbers gone up by a fifth in a week. Alarm bells start to ring. But that number, though rising, is still only about half the level we reached in the spring, those dark days, the spring of last year, to give it some kind of context. Well, behind that data, there's a question. Should we be offering booster jabs? Or should COVID now be treated as an endemic virus similar to flu, as the former chairman of the UK's vaccine task force has said? Dr. Clive Dix said jabs should be for the elderly and the vulnerable, or venerable as it says in front of me here, as is the case with flu. Some of them are venerable too. He called for a major rethink of the UK's COVID strategy, in effect reversing the approach of the past 2 years and returning to a, quote, new normality. Well, what does that look like? Let's turn to an NHS GP, Dr. Mo Karki. Mo, thanks so much for your time. A new normality, what does it look like?
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? I mean, this is the first variant that we've seen that seems to be milder than the previous variants and coronavirus, the COVID-19 virus, in the initial stages. So in that respect, of course, it feels like we're making progress. But of course, this is the first one. And I think we need to urge a little bit of caution before we go straight to saying it's just an endemic virus. Having said that, you know, many of us at the beginning of the pandemic expected this to happen. We expected that the virus would become less dangerous, and we were hoping that it would become more like the flu virus. So hopefully that is what's to come.
Mo, we're going to leave it there. We've miscounted slightly. It's 5 o'clock, so we'll say thank you. And hi there. Welcome to Brazier. Coming up, live at 5, as taxes rise to historic levels, much of it driven by NHS spending. How can Britain be facing a shortage of surgeons? We'll try and dig around for an answer. Also, the presenter who clocked up 46 years at the BBC quits because of the pressure to invite guests who weren't qualified but did hit diversity targets. All that's still to come, but first, the news at 5.
Hello, I'm Tamsin Roberts. Here are the top stories at 5 o'clock. The government will take every step necessary to protect leaseholders in the ongoing cladding crisis, Michael Gove has said. The Housing Secretary told MPs flat owners were shouldering an unfair burden, adding that the building industry should fix the dangerous cladding in medium-rise blocks. Sir Keir Starmer has said the action is welcome but very late. Mr Gove told the Commons that developers who sought to profit should take full responsibility.
Leaseholders are shouldering a desperately unfair burden. They're blameless, and it is morally wrong that they should be the ones asked to pay the price. I'm clear about who should pay the price for remedying failures. It should be the industries who profited as they caused the problem and those who continue to profit as they make it worse. We will also ensure that those who profited and continue to profit from the sale of unsafe buildings and construction products must take full responsibility for their actions and pay to put things right.
Novak Djokovic says he is pleased and grateful after the judge overturned his visa cancellation and aims to compete in the Australian Open. Earlier today, a court ruled he did have the required medical exemption to enter the country without a COVID vaccine. Australia's immigration minister, though, says he reserves the right to exercise personal power to expel the star from the country. Goran Djokovic is the tennis star's uncle. Speaking to GB News, he said his nephew has been treated like an animal.
I don't know what's wrong with the people there, you know. If Novak is not welcoming, they're supposed to say that. Please don't come. And if they issue the visa for him, and after that they arrest him, this is like, for me, it looks like trap for the animals, you know, like a wolf animals in the mountain, you know. And they invite him to come and they trap him and put him in the jail, trying to put him on his knees.
Number 10 says Boris Johnson will not face an investigation into the refurbishment of his Downing Street flat. Labour called for an inquiry after it emerged the Prime Minister had discussed the project with Lord Brownlow through WhatsApp messages. But the PM's official spokesman says it's been confirmed that the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards wouldn't be looking further into the matter. The government is considering cutting the COVID isolation period for the fully vaccinated in England from 7 days to 5. Speaking during a visit to a vaccination centre in his West London constituency, Boris Johnson says they're following the science and that lateral flow tests will continue to be freely available.
I think that we'll use them as long as they're very important. And there's a similar argument to be had about the quarantine period, whether to come down from 7 days to 5 days. We're looking at that, and we'll act according to the science.
A Met police officer has been charged with 9 more offences, including 6 counts of rape. The Crown Prosecution Service says this takes the number of offences David Carrick is charged with to 29. The new charges relate to 4 women alleged to have taken place between 2009 and 2018. The 47-year-old has denied all the previous charges against him. He'll appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Wednesday. 8 men who lost a High Court case against Manchester City Football Club in a battle against a former youth coach have said they'll appeal. The former players claim the convicted paedophile Barry Bennell abused them when they were playing for teams that he coached between 1979 and 85. They say Manchester City were vicariously liable for the harm they suffered, but a judge ruled against them, saying the connection was insufficient and that legal action was brought too late. A lawyer representing the men says they will appeal. Buckingham Palace has unveiled the lineup of celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. It'll mark her 70 years on the throne with a 4-day UK bank holiday weekend from the 2nd to the 5th of June. A platinum pudding competition that'll be judged by a panel, including Dame Mary Berry, is among some of the events being planned, including street parties and a concert. Well, that's it for now. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. It's 4 minutes past 5 now. Back to Colin.
Well, hi there, giving the news a twist on this episode of Brazier. Who's prepared to make tough choices on tax? We present the case for avoiding a big rise in national insurance by cutting the foreign aid budget. I'll be joined by the doyenne of royal writers, Angela Levin, to discuss Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, at 40 and how to make platinum Jubilee pudding. And Life in a Box, as Michael Gove gets stuck between floors Oh yes, we talk to a comedy writer about the comic potential of your lift breaking down while you're in it. All that plus tonight's Brazier angle and our Twitter poll. We are live at 5. Well, amid all the side effects of COVID, this one is pretty unexpected. Britain is facing a shortage of fully qualified surgeons. Over 1 million elective operations in which trainees would have gained vital experience have been lost to the pandemic. The monthly number of elective operations involving trainees is down by 50% on pre-COVID levels in some specialities. So says the Joint Committee on Surgical Training. Senior medics say that many would-be consultants will lack the experience they need to qualify and raise fresh questions about the health service's ability to clear the elective operations backlog. And to compound matters, thanks to the Health Secretary pushing ahead with compulsory vaccines, thousands of NHS workers and some doctors could lose their jobs, if that's what it comes down to. Well, joining me now, Dr. Kate Goodman, a speciality doctor in elderly care at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Gateshead. Doctor, thanks so much for your time. Do appreciate it. This is going to be an expected side effect of COVID for many people, this idea that actually you can be a terribly clever surgeon, brilliantly trained in a lecture theatre, in a laboratory, in a model scenario, but actually what you need is flying hours.
Absolutely. Hi, Colin. Thank you so much for having me on. Absolutely. I mean, the staffing crisis that we're facing at the moment is a huge problem, not just for surgeons, but across the board in the NHS. I mean, it's not unusual for winter to be a difficult time. It's not unusual for elective operations to be cancelled in winter either. It's not unusual for hospitals to be running close to capacity. These are all things that we face every winter in the NHS. However, currently the number of patients in hospitals is actually lower than average, so that's not the issue. The main issue is staff absences. I know that last week over 80,000 NHS staff were absent from work, and that's a much higher number than normal, and 36,000 of those were COVID-related absences, including from sort of the isolation policies.
And the frustration for many people, and it may be a frustration for you, Kate, that is, as you know, lots of them probably don't really need to be self-isolating, but that's a question we'll ventilate on another occasion about what the self-isolation period should be. It seems to be coming down. Just on the point I make about the flying hours, I remember probably 20 years ago now, there was a raging debate about whether individual small towns should retain their general hospitals, and people get very attached to their hospitals, don't they? Rather than going off and having an operation in the big city. And the argument actually was, and it was demonstrable, if you go to the big city hospital, there you'll find, for instance, surgeons who are performing multiple operations each and every year, each and every day, rather than in the local district hospital where it's a bit of a one-off event. And ergo, the people in the big city hospitals are just doing more of it. I mean, I'm coming back to this point that if you don't have the patients to operate on, you don't become a better surgeon necessarily.
Very true, very true. I mean, it's important to gain hands-on experience. I mean, obviously, I'm not a surgeon, but yes, any surgeon is going to be a better surgeon the more patients they have to operate on, the more patients they see, the different variety of cases that they see. So it's really important to get that experience.
Kate, you're the first, I think I'm right in saying you're the first doctor I've talked to since that amazing footage emerged at the end of last week of a doctor in London who challenged Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, and said, look, I've had COVID, I don't need a vaccine. I don't need a vaccination. It was hugely controversial. That goes without saying. I personally, and maybe you do too, think that he was amazingly brave to articulate what he did, whether he was right or not. Amazingly brave to stand out from the crowd and say what he said. Given the shortages in staff that you're seeing, where do you stand on this idea that if you work within the NHS, there is an expectation, it may have legal force, that you must have a vaccine?
Oof. I'm actually unvaccinated myself, so I'm set to lose my job in April. I'm very much opposed to any form of mandate for any medical intervention. I think it's a dangerous path to go down and sets a terrible precedent for the future. I'm not. Sorry, Colin, carry on.
Sorry, Kate, I didn't realise you were going to say that. I had no idea before you appeared on our television screens that you weren't vaccinated and that was your position. How marginal is the position that you take within the hospital? What reaction do you get? How much pressure are you coming under from hospital managers, maybe even from patients, to get jabbed?
I've had no pressure from patients. My patients have actually been very supportive. I'm don't want to sound big-headed, but I'm widely regarded as a caring doctor that my patients love. So they've all been very supportive, but I have been under extreme pressure from hospital management. I've felt sort of bullied and harassed at times over the recent months about my choice, and it's a choice that I've made for myself, weighing up sort of risks and benefits to me from COVID and from the vaccine. And I mean, actually, for the first 12 months of the COVID epidemic, I worked on a COVID ward. I cared for COVID patients every day. I was highly exposed to COVID and didn't actually catch it. I didn't get ill. I didn't test positive. But I went into work every single day. I didn't have adequate PPE like most of my colleagues. My colleagues all became unwell with COVID and I remained well. So I made the decision not to get vaccinated because I didn't feel like I needed the vaccine. And although I'm not anti-vax, I think that this is a fantastic vaccine for those that are vulnerable to COVID. I would advise all of my elderly, frail patients to get it, and I think it's done wonders for reducing hospitalizations and deaths in the vulnerable. But I don't consider myself, I'm in my 30s, I'm fit and healthy. I don't consider myself to be in a vulnerable group, so I don't feel that I need the vaccine. So that's the reason that I didn't take it. And I do believe in the fundamental human right to bodily autonomy. I think it's incredibly important.
I do too, Kate.
Pillar of
I do too.
medical
I do
ethics.
too, and a lot of our viewers agree with you. You know, we can be characterised as headbangers for saying that sometimes. I've been jabbed. I've had the booster, but I would go to the wall for the right of someone like you, and indeed the doctor I mentioned earlier, to stand apart from the crowd. You know the risks. You've seen it visibly, demonstrably before your very eyes on the wards. You know what you're talking about. You are not an ideologue on Twitter. You are somebody there in the wards. What will happen to you later this year?
As things stand, I will lose my career on the 1st of April, which it saddens and angers me that we've got to this point. I've been working towards this point in my career, for as long as I can remember. I wanted to be a doctor since I was about 5.
Kate, we taxpayers, I mean, you know, we taxpayers have put hundreds of thousands of pounds into helping you become a doctor. We've got a stake in you too.
Yes, you do.
And we don't want to lose you.
Well, no, and I don't want to be lost, but I think that I think that the science behind the mandate is flimsy at best, because it's widely known now that the vaccines don't actually stop transmission. So I'm not a great risk to my patients. or no greater risk than a vaccinated member of staff. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
No, Kate, what I'm really curious about, I suppose, is this: it's absolutely revelatory to hear you say what you're saying, just as it was to hear the doctor, the anaesthetist, tell Sajid Javid last week that he had this contrary view. And I just wonder what people like you are saying discreetly to one another. Are you saying anything? Is it occasional discreet WhatsApp messages to somebody you're at med school with? Is it somebody who works on another ward? Are you keeping your heads down? I mean, if you are, I'm guessing you're pretty unusual. I mean, you're prepared to go to the wall on a point of principle, and you are going to lose your livelihood that you've striven for decades to arrive at this position. But on a point of principle, you're prepared to stand by that. But there must be lots of other people like you who share your view but don't share your bravery.
There are, I mean, I'm actually in contact with a lot of other NHS frontline staff that are in a similar position, and they're nervous. They're scared to stick their head above the parapet. It's not particularly fun being me at the moment, so I can totally understand that. But there are a lot of other staff out there, and actually, I mean, we're called anti-vaxxers and we're called vaccine hesitant, but none of the people I'm talking to are hesitant. They've made up their mind. They've made an individual choice. So actually, I think if this mandate goes ahead, which it looks as though it will, the NHS will be in a greater staffing crisis than it is now. Because I mean, numbers at the moment are between 80 and 90,000 staff that are unvaccinated. That is a lot of healthcare staff that the NHS cannot afford to lose.
Do you think, Kate, when push comes to shove, when it comes to April, the government will blink? They have to blink. They can't lose that many people overnight.
I hope so. I don't know. The government has changed its mind on quite a lot of its COVID policies over the last 2 years. So I think there is still hope that they could reverse this decision, but I'm not sure. I'm not holding my breath.
Just finally, Kate Goodman, it's been wonderful talking to you. We appreciate your how candid you are about this. But what do you say to those people who say, this is nuts, this is not, it's just a jab, it's just an injection. Some of the biggest minds in the world have looked at the side effects. It's just an injection. Why doesn't she have it?
Ooh, multiple reasons. One, it's not just a vaccine. It's a brand new vaccine technology that we've not used before, and we do not have long-term data for. So yes, we've done short-term testing, but we don't know what the side effects or complications might look like in 5, 10, 15 years. So it's not just another vaccine. And also, as I said earlier, I think that mandating any medical intervention is dangerous. Everybody is an individual. Their body reacts differently to different medications, different treatments. There is no one size fits all in medicine. And I think that you'll find that if they go ahead with the mandate and people take this without wanting it, and it's not been a decision that's been made for them as an individual, unnecessary harm will be done. And I can't stand behind that.
And as you say, Kate, it's a balance of risks, isn't it? You're not saying under no circumstances no jab. If you're elderly and vulnerable, I want to labour this point, have it.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Kate Goodman, it's absolutely fascinating to talk to you. We really appreciate what you've had to say this evening. I hope you don't get too much flack. I rather suspect you will. But thanks very much indeed for joining us nonetheless. Speaking of flack, I think we're going to talk about the BBC now, are we? Possibly. Yes, we are. Now, I know about this story. Now you're going to find out about it too. Oh, after the break. The weather's next.
Hello again. After a fairly dull day for many today, it should be a lot brighter tomorrow, certainly across the northern half of the UK. Another fairly grey and at times damp day to come tomorrow across the south. It's these weather fronts providing the rain, but they are slowly but surely drifting southwards, and as they clear away, we will see breaks in the cloud developing across Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. But certainly pretty damp here through this evening. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle covering most of England and Wales, and at times through the night, some of that rain may just turn a little heavy, especially over the East Midlands up towards Lincolnshire. But as it clears from Scotland and Northern Ireland, we will just see maybe some pockets of frost, certainly in rural areas. But the south there, we're a long way from a frost, with temperatures holding up with all that cloud and rain and drizzle. A dank and misty, murky start to Tuesday then for most of England and Wales. But quite quickly, Northern England, North Wales turning brighter. A much brighter day for Scotland and Northern Ireland. There will still be showers across the Highlands, the Northern Isles and the Western Isles, and still pretty windy across the far north too. But elsewhere, the winds are light, and across the south, it should turn slowly drier, although the rain and drizzle lingering across East Anglia and the southeast till late on. Mild here, further north, temperatures closer to average. Quite quickly, though, temperatures will drop with the clear skies on Tuesday evening. Southern Scotland, northern England, and then later further south across England and Wales. And as well as turning frosty, there will be some patches of fog, which could be quite dense and could last for much of Wednesday. Generally, though, Wednesday's a dry and a bright day for the vast majority. Still quite cloudy across the northwest with some patchy rain, still quite breezy here as well. But elsewhere, the winds are light, and for many, it'll be a bright winter's day with blue skies, plenty of sunshine. And temperatures after that frosty start close to average. Highest temperatures actually in the northwest. But if the fog sticks, that could really suppress the temperatures. And we're going to see more of that, I think, as the week goes on. Thicker, denser patches of fog, which will take much of the day to clear.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News and on digital radio. Well, it's becoming a thing. Experienced journalists leaving broadcasters they feel have become too woke. Last week, we heard about the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation legend, Tara Henley, who left the CBC saying it's ran stories that belonged on a TV channel by and for students. And today, a variation on the theme. Here in the UK, a BBC presenter who'd clocked up 46 years at the Beeb said he'd left because he felt under too much pressure to make his guest list more diverse. This is Nigel Rees, 77 years of age, presented the Radio 4 programme, quote unquote, looks good on 77, doesn't he? He said he was under pressure to book guests who weren't always suitable, but who qualified as sufficiently diverse. Well, joining me now to talk about this, Rebecca Ryan, the campaign director of Defund the BBC. The title tells you where she's coming from. Rebecca, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. What's wrong when you've got a country like the UK where 20% of the population is ethnic minorities, setting a target for diversity?
Well, I think the main issue is actually the BBC already goes way over its targets based on sort of ethnic background as well. I mean, they used to be measured on the term BAME, which obviously now is not a term that the BBC want to be pushing anymore, but it did push it for years. So they already over-represent people who are from minority ethnic backgrounds, and they over-represent people from pretty much all minority backgrounds except for the over 50s, and when it comes to class backgrounds. So, if you're going to really fixate on this divisive way of representing people, then, let's do it properly, and let's have more people over the age of 50 on, or more people from working class backgrounds. But I think it's a waste of everybody's time, to spend, to, as you say, sort of having to fish through different contributors on topics to find, the people that tick the boxes for each programme. People just want to actually hear about the topic, and it is patronising to think that, I as a woman can't listen to a man saying something because I'll somehow feel insulted that I'm not represented. So, I think it's a waste of time and money.
I mean, there's a big read across here from a quiz show like Quote Unquote into things like current affairs and news, isn't there? That what Nigel Rees is saying is that I've identified, and been doing this job for 46 years in his case, he says, I know who's exactly the right person to come on and talk about that subject in depth. They've got the knowledge, they've got the expertise, but instead I can't get them on because actually their face doesn't fit. And that's a specific question that we're pointing at that particular programme. But as you know, as I know, it happens across the piece.
Absolutely, yeah. I think if we looked for just the best reporting, which is what the people who are paying the licence fee are expecting, that's what the BBC are obliged to deliver based on their charter, is high quality journalism. It doesn't say that they're supposed to represent all parts of the UK as well, but as I said, they're already overachieving on the diversity tick boxes that they aim, that they do focus on. But when it comes to over 50s. And were people from working class backgrounds, then they're not delivering. So I think they're sort of being really, not quite upfront about this.
They can wriggle off the hook in a sense, though, can't they? By saying, look, it's subjective. It's really subjective. The person we've just appointed to be our head of whatever, we think they're great. Prove us wrong.
Yeah. Oh, I think a lot of the sort of behind the scenes stuff as well, this is where you really sort of come across their hypocrisy, because when the on-screen data, and I'm drawing on data from 2020, which was put together by the Diversity Creative Diversity Network, which was commissioned by the BBC themselves. So you see that on-screen they are over-delivering on these checkboxes, but behind the scenes, actually, it's still a sort of Oxbridge middle-class club where, jobs for the boys goes. So, there's a level of hypocrisy there, and perhaps they're overcompensating on screen time so that they can carry on business as usual for their pals behind the scenes. But,
Rebecca Ryan, got to leave it there. We're out of time, but appreciate yours. Thanks a lot. Now, peers in the House of Lords are calling for ministers to make changes when it comes to planning to tackle rising house prices and help both older and younger people, especially younger people, struggling to afford homes. Comes after the government abandoned proposed reforms to the system which threaten to strip homeowners of the right to object to planning applications. Ministers have discussed plans to upgrade the planning application process with a new system including mandatory house building targets. Joining us now, Rico Wojtulewicz. Rico, thanks ever so much for joining us. Appreciate your time, and this is an area of your particular expertise, I know. There is that constant tension for politicians, particularly in this government, between, on the one hand, recognising that you want people to be part of the property-owning democracy, they're then engaged in society in a way that perhaps isn't necessarily true if you're a bit more footloose, and the fact that people have a fundamental right, they feel, to object to somebody's plans to build a new home quite close to them.
Yeah, I think the industry doesn't really mind when people reject a planning application for fair reasons. We call them material reasons. So if it's like loss of life or traffic, those sort of things, that's fine, because effectively you're saying, this is an issue, it needs consideration, so assess it. The problem is that even if you look at a planning application, there are no positive reasons to support an application. It's all really negative. So the government is almost enabling planning politics to remain, and they actually came up with a really good starting point for a debate. We never said, I represent small and medium-sized builders predominantly. We never said this is the final solution. We put together lots of things, so compulsory purchase, how you enable more social housing, self-build, community land trusts. And we said, move planning politics, be more ambitious, and you can deliver better housing scenarios. But the government's chickened out, and with an 80-seat majority, you're not really doing anything in the national strategic interest. And you'd think a government like this would be radical, but they're wasting their political capital. So,
there are voices within government who've tried to be, but there is that, as I've introduced this, there is that tension, isn't there? I just wonder, Rico, how often do you come across, what proportion of those people you come across who are prepared to say, look, OK, I accept the young need somewhere to live. People have got to have somewhere to live. I've got this lovely big home. OK, its view's going to be maybe not blighted, but, affected negatively by this new housing estate on my doorstep. But, I'm going to be philosophical, phlegmatic about that. People need somewhere to live. How common are those people?
It's a mix, and I think that those people don't really discuss that with other people. They don't vocalise it as much as the opposition. I know the government's really worried about, losing voters in the Shire as well. If you look at the most expensive places outside of London, well, they're Oxford, Bath, North East Somerset, Brighton and Hove, Southampton and Reading, and they all saw the most number of 20 to 34-year-olds leaving those areas because they can't afford to stay there. And they're the children of Shire voters. So if the government thinks this is about winning votes and retaining votes, actually what it needs to do is really understand who it's impacting. They're worried about the Shire voters, but they've been levelling them down for 20 years, and now they want to level up the north, which is fantastic and correct. But no amount of increase in wages will absorb that 9% increase of homes every year. So, yeah, it's difficult, and there are people that oppose it, but when you give them the right reasons, I became a homeowner for the first time at 40 years old now last year. I am supporting every application I can in Brighton and Hove to try and get the right type of homes built and the right strategy. I don't oppose density. If you don't want to build on the green belt, go dense. If you oppose all housing, you're going to get the wrong type of home.
Rico Wojtulewicz, we appreciate your time. A lot more to talk about there. We haven't got time, I'm afraid, at least not right now, but thanks ever so much. You're watching Colin Brazier. Plenty more still to come this afternoon. We'll be joined by Angela Levin to talk about the Duchess of Cambridge's a new photograph turning 40. But first, let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines.
Hello, I'm Tamsin Roberts. Here are the latest headlines. The government will take every step necessary to protect leaseholders in the ongoing cladding crisis, Housing Secretary Michael Gove has said. He told MPs flat owners were shouldering an unfair burden, adding that the building industry should fix the dangerous cladding in medium-rise blocks. Sir Keir Starmer has said the action is welcome but very late. Novak Djokovic says he is pleased and grateful the judge overturned his visa cancellation and aims to compete in the Australian Open. Earlier today, a court ruled he did have the required medical exemption to enter the country without a COVID vaccine. But the nation's immigration minister says he reserves the right to exercise personal power to expel the star from the country. The government is considering cutting the COVID isolation period for the fully vaccinated in England from 7 days to 5. Speaking during a visit to a vaccination centre in his West London constituency, Boris Johnson says ministers will follow the science. The Prime Minister also says lateral flow tests will continue to be freely available. A Met police officer has been charged with 9 more offences, including 6 counts of rape. The Crown Prosecution Service says this takes the number of offences David Carrick is charged with to 29. The new charges relate to 4 women alleged to have taken place between 2009 and 2018. The 47-year-old has denied all the previous charges against him. He'll appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Wednesday. Buckingham Palace has unveiled the lineup of celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Her 70 years on the throne will be marked with a 4-day UK bank holiday weekend from the 2nd to the 5th of June. A platinum pudding competition will be judged by a panel, including Dame Mary Berry. And there'll be a number of street parties and concerts. Well, you're right up to date. It's 5:36. I'll be back with more on today's main stories at the top of the hour.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
You're with me, Colin Brazier, on GB News and on digital radio. Now, newspaper coverage of the royal family was divided at the weekend. The Prince Andrew saga continues to float the Republican boat, so it was that the Sunday Mirror carried a story about war hero Colonel Tim Collins arguing for an end to the honorary military positions held by the Duke of York. But elsewhere, there was widespread coverage of Kate at 40. The Duchess of Cambridge was widely profiled and indeed photographed, looking absolutely stunning. And what was clear is that a consensus, I think, is emerging that she has really evolved, a very different woman from the shy, diffident princess we first met almost 20 years ago, supplanted now by this confident future queen that we see before us. And for monarchists, that's good news, because one day the negativity of the Prince Andrew story will, we hope, we imagine, disappear from the front pages, and then the royal family can hope for decades of positive coverage from the increasingly high-profile and popular Kate. Well, let's turn to the doyenne of royal writers, Angela Levin. She chuckles every time I call you the doyenne. It's true. It's true, though. You are. Shall we let's just park Prince Andrew for a second. In fact, let's just park Kate as well. Let's talk about the Platinum Jubilee, can we, a little bit. Plans unveiled for a cake, a pudding competition, and the big pageant up the Mall. Do those things still float anybody's boat in a world of Twitter and all the rest of it?
Yes.
A pageant on the Mall.
I think people love it. I remember going to an earlier Jubilee when there was 1,000 boats going along the Thames, and it was absolutely pelting. It was absolutely freezing. The Duke of Edinburgh got ill and he had to go to hospital afterwards. But it was jam-packed with so many hundreds of people, loads of young people too, which I thought was quite significant. And everybody got friendly. A lot of people had plastic glasses to put the champagne in. Everyone was cheering. It became a sort of wonderful event because it was raining and we were all still there, and it couldn't be more typical of England, you know. And I think people do love that, actually. I think they enjoy a good knees up and something festive. And I know quite a lot about the great lunch for which the pudding is going to be cooked. And this goes all around the country, villages, towns, and it's the patron is Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, and there's huge trellis tables where people meet, and it's a way of getting to know your neighbours. Yeah. And you don't pay for the food, you can bring a bit and it all arrives, and it's just very neighbourly. And I think that's what we need, actually.
You get sniffy folk who'll you know, mock that sort of wholesome swallows and Amazon stuff, but actually it's brilliant, isn't it? And it's one of the things that the royal family and the punctuation marks and the royal story give us an excuse to do. Get the trestle tables out, talk to your neighbours, press a bit of flesh.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think we need that particularly now because we've all been so isolated and we haven't done much. We haven't had much to be pleased about and still don't, really. But I think for a woman who's been sitting on the throne for over 70 years now, that is something to be pleased about. And I think all generations respect her and like her. And we can all go boom, you know, it's just going to be
Well, let's hope it doesn't go boom necessarily. That wouldn't be...
Well, I mean, everybody goes.
I mean, I wonder how many people will, younger people especially, might just see this as an opportunity, without being excessively morbid, to see the Queen while they still can.
Yes, but none of us know where we're going to be next, tomorrow, later on today. You know, so I think that that's a fair thing to do when you want to see someone of 95. But she is extraordinary. And when eventually she does pass, and it'll be a huge effect on everybody, I think, because she is quite outstanding. She's still got her views. She's respected all around the world. People who don't like the monarchy say, but I quite like her because she's amazing. And it's very interesting that they see through a lot of people, but they can see that she's very solid. She's old-fashioned, which is quite interesting when young people really like her, because the things they'd actually say they don't like, she's got, and they like her. So it's a bit of a mix.
Is Kate, one day to be Queen Kate, old-fashioned?
Is she old-fashioned?
Oh, I'm asking you.
I think, yes, I'm asking myself that one. I don't think so. I think she's very well tuned to things, but she also knows how to manage them. She comes from a very stable family, which has got that behind her. And I think that's really important. And I remember way back when William dropped her because he was unsure about going out with her for so long and not asking her the question, will you marry me? And instead of telling her story, instead of, you know, hiding away, she got some very, very nice mini skirts and tops, and she went out dancing. And I thought that woman, young woman, has got a lot of courage, a lot of determination. And I think that she's used the determination as and when she wants to, and it's worked absolutely brilliantly. She doesn't complain, she doesn't lose her temper. Aides who've worked with her for a long time say, you never see her in a really bad mood.
Really?
And she also knows exactly how to help William. And if he gets stressed, she can calm it and make him laugh. And he's her number one priority. And when Harry and Meghan gave their interview to Oprah Winfrey, she put all her energy into looking after William. Never mind that she'd been attacked and criticised beyond anything that was reasonable. she was wanted to look after him and make sure that he would help him deal with it.
And they were fantastic pictures at the weekend, weren't they?
They're stunning pictures. They're absolutely stunning pictures. And it's very historical as well, very carefully thought out. She organised it all. She had that red dress is her now, youthful and extremely attractive, and you know, she's got pockets in her wonderful skirt. And the profile is very much Queen Victorian based, and a sort of very ethereal type of person. And the other one is very similar to Diana, who looks straight at the camera in that marvellous picture that was taken of her. And she had Diana's earrings on two of the pictures, and she had her ring, which was also from Diana. So she was putting herself amongst the royals very carefully.
You described the way she looked beautifully, which is important because we're now going on radio as well as TV. So thanks for painting a picture. Angela Levin, as ever, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, the country's most self-regarding news show suffered a hitch today. The BBC's flagship Today programme was waiting to interview Cabinet Minister Michael Gove when he got stuck in one of the corporation's lifts. Mr Gove, Secretary of State for Levelling Up and Local Government and a couple of other jobs besides, there he is. He took his unexpected confinement in that lift in good part.
Not at all, Nick. No. After more than half an hour in the lift, you successfully levelled me up.
There was a new hashtag, had just begun in the last few minutes, Free Michael Gove.
Well, that's very kind. I suspect there were probably rather more people hoping I'd be incarcerated for rather longer, but still.
Lucky. How unlucky was Mr Gove? We're told the average office lift makes about 400,000, I'll explain that picture in a second, about 400,000 journeys between floors a year. On that basis, it's been calculated that if you work in an office for 40 years, you stand a 6% chance of getting stuck in a lift during the course of your working life. Given those odds, Mr Gove was unlucky, but far from alone. Cue picture. This was Stephen Fry, trapped in a lift on the 26th floor of London's Centre Point building in 2009. He tweeted at the time, "We could be here for hours." Well, you've seen the picture. Well, you can see what he said. There are a few rude words at the end, which is a shame for such a talented wordsmith. And it does seem that far from being a claustrophobic experience, getting stuck in a lift is now as much of an opportunity as a threat, an opportunity to create online content, providing there's reception inside the elevator. So, for instance, when the former Australian cricket captain Steve Smith got stuck 20 floors up for an hour, his video of his incarceration went viral on Twitter. What should you do if you find yourself trapped in a lift with or without Michael Gove? Joining us now, the comedian Leo Kearse, who experienced something like this recently. That's all I know. He'll tell us more now. Leo, what happened to you?
Yeah, I was stuck in a lift in Glasgow. I was in Glasgow, so I wasn't in a particular hurry to get out. But basically, my offices were they're with WeWork, and so there's lots of every floor in the building was like another business. And I got in the lift and went down to a floor that wasn't open. This was during lockdown, so there were hardly any people in the building anyway. I don't know if the security guard was around or anything, and the lift stopped because I'd gone to the wrong floor. It wouldn't let me out, but it also wouldn't respond to. It wasn't responding to any of the buttons that I pressed, and then the lights went off because the lift assumed that it was inactive. So I immediately urinated into my shoe and drank it just as a precaution. I phoned my girlfriend because she'd been stuck in a lift at her work. So I was just like, just a couple of weeks previously. So I was like, you won't believe this, I'm stuck in a lift as well. And then I Googled. I think I phoned the customer service number for WeWork, and they got the security guy to come and turn a key and get the lift to go back to where I wanted to be. And then I got out of the lift, and you'll be pleased to know that I'm no longer in the lift.
All told, it doesn't quite qualify for ordeal. Uncomfortable, maybe. I mean, we make light of it, but presumably the technology's got a lot better. There's probably goodness knows how many fatalities from lift accidents over the years, way back when. But having that smartphone, just being able to talk to somebody, if there was a gathering sense of claustrophobia, it's partly banished by being able to ring someone, or your girlfriend in your case.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky that the lift didn't create some sort of Faraday cage and block that 5G signal, because then I'd actually be in trouble. But yeah, with a smartphone, they're just amazing. I remember like traveling and stuff. It used to be so difficult. You go to Thailand, you need like a little Lonely Planet book and stuff like that. And now everything is on your phone. So no matter where you are in the world, whether you're in in a paddy field in Cambodia, or if you're in a lift in Glasgow, you've got everyone you know right at your fingertips, and you can get help.
Leo, very good to talk to you. Leo Kirst there. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Now it's time for the Brazier angle. Will Boris Johnson lead the Tories into the next general election? Lots of folk think not, but I'm not one of them. I think he's a two-term Prime Minister who's only halfway through his first. Why do I say that? Well, since our Prime Minister is a keen student of political history, we start with a history lesson. Today is the anniversary, the year was 1979, of this infamous moment, when the then Labour Prime Minister, James Callaghan, returned to Britain from abroad. The country he'd left behind was in the grip of strike action and sinking deeper into its winter of discontent. But as he disembarked from his official plane, Sonny Jim, looking tanned and relaxed after a summit in the Caribbean, said Britain wasn't descending into chaos, even if rubbish was piling up on the streets and bodies were not being buried. He never actually said the words which The Sun used in its headline the next day, but crisis, what crisis, was one of those acts of journalistic licence which summed up the frustration many felt at the time. On the surface, there are parallels between James and Boris. Callaghan was PM for 3 years, the length of time Boris would have clocked up, if, as some say, is likely. He's forced out this year. Like Callaghan, Boris is behind in the polls, but the thing they really have in common is inflation. Callaghan was the last British Prime Minister to grapple with a real inflationary spiral. And some commentators think that rising prices will do for Johnson too. Well, I don't. The unions have far less power than they did. The dead will get buried. And anyway, Boris can reasonably claim that rising wages, far from being an unalloyed evil, are actually a victory for Brexit. He predicted that pay packets would start to reflect what British workers deserve to be paid once they were no longer undercut by cheap EU labour. Jim Callaghan may never have said the words attributed to him, but Johnson really did say, F business. So if inflation doesn't get him, what will? Callaghan was removed by the electorate, but Tory Prime Ministers tend to be removed by people on their own side. Let's reflect on that with some of the emails we've had today. Not necessarily on this story, but some of the others. Let's just take you through the elevator story for a start. Kevin says, I once tripped going into a lift with a cabinet minister in there with a smiling face, open mouth and a cold sweat, but I never got trapped, thankfully. Tricia says, evocatively, I got stuck between levels 81 and 82 of the Empire State Building for 20 minutes, not long after 9/11. There were 13 of us, and it was pretty scary and very hot. We were met by police, security staff and paramedics when we were rescued. We continued to the viewing platform, though. Phil says, I once shared an elevator ride at Headingley Cricket Ground with Sir Geoff Boycott and Sir John Major. Fortunately, didn't get stuck. Lots of your thoughts coming in our interview with Kate Goodman, that extraordinary doctor up in Gateshead, who was telling us earlier that she ultimately is very fearful of losing her job and livelihood come April when that mandatory vaccine policy for the NHS comes into effect. She thinks that thousands of clinicians like her, as well as other NHS workers, will effectively be left in the same boat. That's been generating a lot of comment from you as well today. And so too the story of Novak Djokovic. Frank says, I feel sorry for the other tennis players. Should Djokovic be barred, the winner will always face the question, but what if Djokovic was allowed to compete? This is bad for Australian tennis and Australian sport in general. David says, being rich gives you access to the best legal advice available. How many could afford to challenge a government's decision and risk losing the case, paying costs, etc.? Harry says, and I suspect speaks for many when he says, Djokovic was invited to play in Australia, wasn't he? And Tyrone says, according to the judge, Djokovic did not enter the country illegally. Keep those thoughts coming in. I'm hearing on the Kate Goodman story, the NHS have been offered a right of reply, some tendentious comments from him. Some of you will agree with what she had to say, Kate Goodman. Others will take the view she has every right to view her own body's autonomy, that was the word she used, as her own business, and nobody else's. Thanks for watching. The weather's next.
Hello again. After a fairly dull day for many today, it should be a lot brighter tomorrow, certainly across the northern half of the UK. Another fairly grey and at times damp day to come tomorrow across the south. It's these weather fronts providing the rain, but they are slowly but surely drifting southwards, and as they clear away, we will see breaks in the cloud developing across Scotland and Northern Ireland overnight. But certainly pretty damp here through this evening. Outbreaks of rain and drizzle covering most of England and Wales, and at times through the night, some of that rain may just turn a little heavy, especially over the East Midlands up towards Lincolnshire. But as it clears from Scotland and Northern Ireland, we will just see maybe some pockets of frost, certainly in rural areas. But the south there, we're a long way from a frost, with temperatures holding up with all that cloud and rain and drizzle. A dank and misty, murky start to Tuesday then for most of England and Wales. But quite quickly, Northern England, North Wales turning brighter, a much brighter day for Scotland and Northern Ireland. There will still be showers across the Highlands, the Northern Isles and the Western Isles, and still pretty windy across the far north too. But elsewhere, the winds are light, and across the south, it should turn